All right, one more look at Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10, and then I promise we will move on. Although I think even as we do so, these questions that we've been wrestling with, these questions about love and worship, these questions about our relationship with money and our relationship with God and how they interact, those questions will continue to linger on in the background, even as we move on from Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10. And to be honest, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because we're not very good at talking about money. We're not very good at asking questions about money. And these are big questions, right? They're elusive questions and they're difficult to answer. And we need to keep coming back to them time after time after time. I think the temptation is because we find money um, so difficult to talk about, because we're so awkward around it, and because we can so easily feel attacked when we talk about money. The temptation is to kind of do a hit and run. It's like, okay, well, it mentions it here, so we probably need to talk about it, but then let's move on as quickly as we possibly can. Something that we're more familiar with, something that we feel more comfortable talking about and reflecting on. But actually, no, this question of our love for money, this question of whether we are looking to money to provide for us what only God can provide, these are profound questions, all right, and they interrogate us at very deep levels of our being, and we need to take time. We need to keep coming back to these questions again and again. Sometimes just so that we can learn to ask them properly, let alone move on to actually push towards an answer to some of these questions. I mean, that takes a huge amount of spiritual self awareness and honesty and courage. And again, that can just take time to breed. But do we handle our money in the way in which God tells us to? I suppose when you strip it all down, that really does. That's one of the most profound diagnostic questions. Do we actually do with our money what the Lord tells us to do with it in His Word? And I think that's quite a revealing question, because I wonder actually how many of us really know the totality of what the Bible teaches about money and our relationship with money and what we're supposed to use our money for. It's strange to me, isn't it? You think about how much time and energy goes into money, making money, handling money, you know, um, managing debt and credit and budgets and making sure we have enough money, huge amounts of time and energy. It's got such a massive place in our lives. And yet I wonder how many of us as Christians have really sat down and given this question of how we handle money the sustained consideration that really we ought to have given it, especially when you think about, well, for some of us, how much money goes through our hands over the course of our working lives. Now, one of the most uh, one of the most foundational things that we need to hear from the Bible is actually it's not our money. And this is a really key shift in our thinking. We can often feel a little bit resentful when somebody, even if that somebody is doing so with the authority of the Bible, when somebody tries to tell us how to handle our money. But actually, it's not ours. When you study the Bible, one of the first things that you'll learn about this is that it is the Lord's money, and that He has given it to us on trust, not for us to do with it whatever we want, but for us to do with it what He has commanded. He's given it to us for a purpose, and that we will be held accountable based on, how faithful we were using the money He gave us to do with it the things that He told us to do. All right, and I think even if we can get that in place, that makes this whole process kind of a much easier one to negotiate. Now, Solomon has seen people do that well. Solomon has seen people handle money in a godly way, and we'll reflect on that as we get towards the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 5. But actually, for us, wrestling with this question, it's probably worth acknowledging that this is one of the great, in some ways, this is one of the great sins of our time. I think, like I said a couple of videos ago, and we come from a society and a culture where love for money and kind of the worship of money, looking to money to give to us and to do for us what only God can do. It is so widespread in our culture, and our society is built on it in many ways. We're quite open in our culture about our fixation with money and the economy. And it's easy to think, well, because that's what our society is like, that's why money is such a problem for us. But actually, money, or rather, let's be really disciplined about how we talk about this. Love for money has always been a problem. Right? You look in the Gospels, right? Luke chapter 12. There's the guy in a crowd comes to Jesus, and it's one of those moments where you think, okay, here's this guy. As far as we know from Luke's Gospel, this guy says one sentence. He's got one sentence to talk, to put to Jesus. And you think, well, what's he going to talk about? He's got the living God. He's got the one who created and sustains him and all things standing before him. What is the one thing you would want to be able to say to that God? And this guy comes to Jesus, and his one sentence is like, he says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And you're thinking, oh man, you really blew it, didn't you? It's like you're there before Jesus, and what's the one thing you want Jesus? You want Jesus to make sure you get a fair share in somebody's will. All right, and Jesus's reply is breathtaking. He says, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Just like, I'm not interested in that. He said, "Look, watch out." This is what Jesus then says. He says, "Watch out and be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Now, look, it's like I keep saying. Right? There's nothing in the Bible against money per se. It is the love of money. It is the greed that is the root of all kinds of evil. And it's love of money that Solomon is repenting of here in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Not saying that money or making money or handling money is intrinsically evil. But, like the saying goes, Solomon is learning that money can't buy happiness. Mind you, poverty can't buy anything at all. And there's this sense, there's nothing in the Bible that necessarily demands that we embrace living on a shoestring budget. All right, it's worth saying that. It's so easy to hear teaching like this and to assume that what the Bible says is we all must be deeply financially impoverished. Right? We're not saying that at all. We're not saying that at all. In fact, one of the moments in the Bible that captures a really healthy attitude to money is in Proverbs chapter 30. Two things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Okay, keep falsehood and lies far from me. That's one thing. And the other, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God. It's so easy to allow our love of money to lead us into sin, whether we have too much of it or whether we have too little. Now, it's important that we just live with these questions for a sustained period of time, because certainly one of the things I noticed about myself is that it is so easy to justify just about anything if I really want to do it, and actually we need to get past all of that and wrestle these questions out. Now, again, there are good and wise ways to relate to money and to handle money. And a lot of it focuses on the question of contentment and using money for the purposes for which God gives it to us. And like I said, we will now move on and start to look at some of that stuff over the next few videos. But the key thing to remember as we finally leave Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10 behind is Solomon's recognition that to look for our sense of meaning and purpose in making money and in having money and in what money can get us, to love money, to worship money, to make an idol of money, actually at the end of the day, it is utterly pointless. It's meaningless because money simply cannot deliver on that agenda. And for many people, this might be one of the hardest lessons that we need to learn in terms of our Christian discipleship. But this is the key issue all the way through Ecclesiastes, right? Where do we find purpose? Where do we find meaning? Where do we find significance? And Solomon's point is it's not in money. All right. In fact, money can create a whole world of problems of its own. All right, there's a sense of restlessness and dissatisfaction. There is greed and there is discontent. All of that seems to come, in Solomon's experience at least, seems to come with money and loving money. And that's what we're going to look at in the next few verses.